Hello everyone, it's great seeing you again, and thanks for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather, 27th day of December 2020, and I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, hosting today's show once again. Up first, hazardous weather graphic comes up here, and we've got some highlighted areas. Starting east there, that's for the Alaska Range, and that's a high wind warning, which is out until 6 p.m. Monday. Currently out now, will continue through tonight and through tomorrow to 6 p.m. And that's for wind gusts east-southeast to possibly even south, but more of an east-southeast direction there, above 60 or 65 miles an hour during that time frame, especially through the passes west of the Toe Cutoff. And out to the west there, we've got a winter storm warning out for the lower Yukon River Valley, as well as the Yukon Delta for tonight and until 6 p.m. Monday afternoon, and that's for continued snow. Blowing snow could pick up several more inches, and then the winds gusting 30 to 55, maybe even 60 miles an hour, especially tonight and this evening. That'll create visibilities less than a quarter mile to whiteout conditions there, anywhere in the lower Yukon River Valley and the Delta, and St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait coast, including the south coast of the Seward Peninsula, Nome. Winter storm warning also out until 6 p.m. Monday for continued snow, blowing snow, and winds gusting 40 to 60 miles an hour. Some areas even higher than that, but those winds will be slowly improving throughout the day tomorrow, even though the warning extends out until 6 p.m. Otherwise, that's a winter weather advisory out for the northern Yukon Delta coast area there, up to the eastern Norton Sound zone, the Lotto Hills. That's for conditions not quite as bad as in the warning areas. And so blowing snow visibilities in areas at times, maybe down to a half mile or less or so, with winds still gusting 40 to 50 miles an hour, slowly improving late tonight and throughout the day on Monday. And from there, looking at satellite imagery, pretty strong frontal system with a very deep low pressure area out over the southern Bering Sea there north of the Aleutians, and that front pushed pretty good winds with rainfall or precipitation that wasn't as impressive as the wind speeds were. For example, let's see, Kaliganek had a peak wind gust of today of 60 miles per hour, and Sparrowvon, Western Alaska Range, about 55 miles an hour for the wind gusts there. And even stronger, Farewell Lake area had gusts to 91 miles per hour earlier today. And then the top wind gust I could find was at Cape Newenham, 94 miles per hour. Again, out of the east-southeast. Winds coming down now as that front pushes in. It's weakening. And precipitation not all that heavy with it. Kodiak had about half an inch of rain, some of which most of which fell as snow, and then changed to rain last several hours of the afternoon. Fell as wet snow. Temperatures generally above freezing the entire time. Same situation for Seward. Changing to rain late this afternoon, but most of their 4/10 of an inch fell as snow, but it was wet snow. So probably did get an accumulation at maybe 2 to 3 inches, 1 to 3 inches possibly in that area. And otherwise, very sparse as far as any snowfall goes into Cook Inlet or any farther to the north. But Cordova, had about 1 to 2 inches of snow around the area there, with the airport picking up about 1/10 of an inch water equivalent, but it did fall as snow. And Valdez had some light snow throughout the afternoon today, and they've probably gotten anywhere from a half inch to some areas maybe an inch, but it wasn't too heavy yet. Probably will see some more tonight, though. Otherwise, let's see, Port Moller also had some wet snow, maybe a half inch or so, and inch to, or actually southern Kenai Peninsula there, let's call it 1 to 3 inches, give or take. Some areas less, some areas more, especially in the hills. Otherwise, it's kind of showery and continued windy over the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians there, behind the front with that low spinning and pulling slowly northward. And you can also see some breaks in the clouds out there along the Aleutians and into the Bering Sea. Otherwise, up to the north, a lot quieter conditions, especially over the southeast coast with some clouds and basically dry conditions there, a little bit of clearing in some areas. On the chart, snow and blowing snow, as you can see, southwest interior, mostly Yukon Delta, lower Yukon River Valley areas. And then also the St. Lawrence Island, strong winds gusting 40 to 60 miles an hour there and 40 to 50 miles an hour, say from Norton Sound across the Seward Peninsula. And still breezy, but less wind and definitely less precipitation up over the Kotzebue Sound area in the northwest coast. Where you can see the strong tight gradient there, western Alaska range, again with those strong winds, Sparrowvon and Farewell lakes there. And a little breezy, but not that strong for, say, Turnagain Arm and the upper hillside of Anchorage. All the gradients staying to the west so far with high pressure holding over the Yukon. Kept the panhandle dry. You did have some leftover moisture from a weak trough that brought some light snow across south central Alaska overnight or last evening, and that drifted in along the coast of the north side of the panhandle, but really precipitation, nothing significant at all, basically dry with light winds there. About the same up over the eastern interior to the Arctic coast. And looking at the forecast for tonight, that front really washes out considerably with the main low center kind of pulling north and actually trying to drift to the west, continues to weaken, pressure up to 950 millibars now from the from the 946 millibars here at mid-afternoon today. So slowly weakening. A couple of troughs will enhance the wind and precipitation. It should be mostly in the form of rain for the Alaska Peninsula, Eastern Aleutians. Even the Pribilofs are a mixture of. But if there is snow, it won't really amount to much. It'll be temperatures well above freezing. And then it mixes back and changes back towards snow with a little bit brisker and colder north to northwest winds for the Western Aleutians, Shimmy and Attu. And blizzard warnings we saw continues, or winter storm warning continues tonight, St. Lawrence Island to the Bering Strait coast. But you can see the precipitation starting to slacken off. But there'll still be areas of blowing snow there over the southwest interior areas. And that front will increase the wind and precipitation chances for south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast tonight. Winds should pick up in the Copper River Basin, definitely along the Alaska Range where the high wind warning is out. And still a risk of a light isolated rain or snow shower for the northern panhandle, otherwise fair and mostly cloudy. And for the day on Monday, still remnants of that frontal boundary with kind of held in place there with the flow just south to north, really not pushing it any farther to the east. Continuing to weaken in place and conditions slowly improve across all of the western interior and eventually even the Seward Peninsula, the northwest coast. By late tomorrow afternoon into the evening. Otherwise, pretty unsettled. That low center now pulling back to the west and still slowly weakening, about 958 millibars with several troughs rotating around the southern quadrant of that, kicking up the winds and precipitation as they pass by whatever islands there in the Aleutians and eventually swinging up toward the Pribilofs. Should be a dry day, basically, with Kodiak Island, but a warm front will spread light rain up toward the Alaska Peninsula in the afternoon. Another warm front will spread some rain up to the northern or along the central north coast of the Panhandle, possibly pushing eastward in the afternoon and into the mainly eastern North Gulf Coast areas. And taking a look at the outlook for Tuesday. Low pressure, weak low pressure by comparison, but still 977 millibars for the central reading there in toward the Barren Islands, and the trough with that swinging up to the North Gulf Coast. Looks like an increase in the winds and rain again, mixture of precipitation over the inland areas and higher elevations. And it looks like pretty much periods of rain and breezy for the Panhandle. And out west, weaker occluded front develops and pushes eastward for wind and a little bit of a not much of a wind condition, not a significant gradient there. The stronger winds still up over the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island area, but pretty brisk out over the western Aleutians closer to that main, but still weakening low center that's still holding, sort of retreating a little bit even farther to the west on Thursday from where it'll be tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow night. But notice the interior basically dry with a lot of clear skies, central and eastern areas, and variable clouds out to the west coast. Lows for tonight, 5 to 15 below eastern interior north of the Alaska Range, to above 0, 5 to 10 for the central Tanana Valley to Tanana, and single numbers there in the Koyukuk Valley. And below 0, 5 to 15 below, say for the north slope to the Arctic coast, and mid-20s. Nome and St. Lawrence Island, 20s to lower 30s southwest interior, with mid to upper 30s for your lows for the Bristol Bay Area and Alaska Peninsula. Chillier slowly as you head out toward Shimmy and Attu. Mid-20s northern Panhandle to mid-30s along the central coast. Highs for tomorrow, lower 30s Lynn Canal, Klondike Highway down to Juneau will be mid-30s to lower 40s towards Sitka and possibly Metlakatla up to 40. Otherwise, central interior, Tanana Valley, mid to upper teens. And single numbers, upper Yukon Valley and down toward North Wyandotte, a little below zero for the highs along the Arctic coast and North Slope, and 30s out to the southwest. Lows, Tuesday morning shaping up like this. Not too bad, actually. No real cold temperatures occurring or even in the forecast here for anywhere in Alaska for the next week or so. But a little below zero North Slope in the Arctic coast. Lows in the upper 20s to mid-30s for south central Alaska. And that'll be followed by highs Tuesday afternoon, right around zero for the North Slope Arctic coast, a little above for the Brooks Range, back down to around zero for the Yukon Flats, and lower to mid-30s. Susitna Valley, northern Cook Inlet to lower 40s, safe for Kachemak Bay and the central and southern southeast coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, we've got good VFR, Arctic coast, North Slope, across the Brooks Range into the northern interior until we get down into the mid or upper Kuskokwim Valley and then Alaska Range. And then south of the mountains there, on down to the south, you run into marginal VFR with areas of IFR, western slope or eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, down over the southwest southern Kuskokwim Valley into the mountains, northern Togiak Bay, and looks like Dillingham. IFR also along the southwest coast, mainly the Yukon Delta and Nunivak Island, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island through the Strait, and extending up to the northwest coast. And then another batch out there over the southwest Bering, just affecting Shimei and Attu as far as the land areas go. IFR, Prince William Sound, and possibly Resurrection Bay eastward into the northern Panhandle. And looks pretty well either marginal VFR or IFR, especially Prince of Wales Island. And let's see what the afternoon holds. Look for some VFR to increase over toward the border of the central and southern border areas there of the Panhandle. Otherwise, marginal VFR with Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay holding with the IFR, and that will hold through Tuesday. And for the North Gulf Coast, IFR continues. And some marginal VFR slipping eastward with IFR along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range in areas. Northern Bering Sea still IFR into the Strait and about Kivalina up to Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, IFR. And marginal for the western central Aleutians. And check out the VFR there for the Fox Islands, much of the Alaska Peninsula, and a good chunk of the southeast Bering Sea into Bristol Bay, just east of the Pribilof Islands. Moving on to Tuesday morning, that area out there holds, now includes St. Paul and St. George, starting out VFR, at least forecast-wise, and Fox Islands as well, western Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay, then IFR for Togiak Bay into the southwest mountains, southern Kuskokwim Valley, IFR Yukon Delta coast, also inland up the River Valley there a ways, and western Norton Sound, southern Seward Peninsula, Golovin, Nome on up to Tin City, and Wales, as well as St. Lawrence Island, IFR. And that extends up to Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, maybe to Point Lay, central and eastern Arctic coast VFR, and the Panhandle IFR north, some VFR over toward the southeast areas. And then for the afternoon, marginal VFR with areas of IFR there for the southeast coast, mostly marginal VFR, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, central southern Cook Inlet and the Talkeetnas, eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, southwest hills again, and along the Yukon Delta coast, northern Bering Sea, on up to the western Arctic coast, improving over the Bering Sea there with just minimal IFR and marginal conditions, Adak to Shimei and Attu, and the Fox Islands with some VFR for False Pass, Cold Bay, Nelson Lagoon, Sand Point. Passes VFR, except becoming marginal in the afternoon, but staying VFR out the north entrance for both Anaktuvuk and Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional IFR, especially on the eastern approaches, both passes. IFR eastern approach for rainy, otherwise marginal. Windy, marginal VFR, but staying VFR out the north side. Isabel, IFR at times, and Mentasta, possible. Just a threat of some marginal VFR at some point in the day on the southern entrance, otherwise pretty good. Tanita, marginal VFR, but higher conditions out west. And Portage, IFR in the eastern approach, otherwise marginal. Chilkoot and White, IFR for the next couple days. And the freezing levels at the surface north of St. Matthew Island, but 2,000 feet well south of the Aleutians, but up across Kodiak Island, not quite to the Kenai Peninsula and across Dixon Entrance. Icing, band of moisture with some Considerable moderate rime icing looks like northern Prince William Sound, eastern North Gulf Coast, with lighter isolated moderate areas of icing on the north coast of the Panhandle, back in across Cook Inlet and south central Alaska's Susitna Valley. Another batch streaming northward there to the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, just areas of possible icing of the light to very isolated moderate variety out west and over the St. Lawrence Island area to the Bering Strait. Jet stream, huge upper low out there, pretty much stationary. Southwest flow 65 to 80 knots coming into southern Alaska, westerly over the Panhandle. 9,000 feet, south-southwest, 40 to as high as 55 knots over the southern interior of the state. Lighter up north, 3,000 feet, south-southwest, 45 knots, Bering Sea east side, diminishing as you head east across the interior. And turbulence, considerable moderate chop there over the southwest interior areas, right down to Togiak Bay and the western Arctic coast. And light to isolated moderate chop. Could be a little more in the way of moderate there for the Alaska Peninsula early on. Moderate chop for the eastern Aleutians and western Aleutians as well. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, joined once again by the science liaison of GINA, Eric Stevens. GINA, of course, is the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And GINA is all about satellites, and Eric is always here to tell some really cool stuff about satellites. Now, the last time you were here, we talked about how the weather satellites can see clouds and what's under the clouds, but you're telling me that satellites can do a lot more, even protect the general public with aviation safety information.
That's right. There's one particular aspect of satellites we're going to talk about today that might not be immediately obvious, and that is detecting things in the atmosphere that are not clouds, that are not snow, not rain, but rather a hazard that can happen here in Alaska, and that is volcanic ash.
Of course.
When a volcano goes off, puts ash in the air, this is, of course, a hazard to the public if the ash were to fall on the ground in accumulating amounts.
Sure.
Additionally, while the ash is in the air, and this is the more frequent hazard, is it's a hazard to aviation because you cannot fly an airplane into volcanic ash without great risk. Worst case scenario, the ash gets into a jet engine, wrecks the engine, kills the engine, and now you have an airplane flying with no engines. It won't fly for long. So aviators need to avoid that ash. How do you avoid the ash? You have to know where it is by identifying it with a satellite image and perhaps predicting then where the ash will flow with the overall weather patterns. Satellites are so important for identifying when a volcano goes off and then tracking the ash after the volcano injects the ash into the atmosphere.
Now, are you talking about seeing the heat signature or a huge volcanic plume with a cloud that we're used to seeing in the really pretty pictures of any Alaska volcano that's erupted recently, Redoubt, for example? Or are we talking about the really fine details? Because this is polar orbiting satellites, the ones that are very low to the ground, right?
The geostationary satellites can do some detection. The polar orbiters, like you say, they're closer to the Earth. They give the even better view. In answer to your question, I would say all of the above.
Oh, okay.
A heat signature from a volcano going off with all the heat that comes with the eruption, that can be identified in infrared imagery.
Okay.
We've got images from the Kamchatka Peninsula. That's the far eastern part of Russia on the western side of the Bering Sea, loaded with volcanoes.
Right.
You know, Alaska has plenty of volcanoes of its own. We can also be affected when a volcano goes off in Kamchatka, say, and then the weather carries that ash toward Alaska from the west.
Right.
You can see the infrared heat signature, like you say. Also, the ash in the air can be detected by doing some sophisticated channel differencing within the satellite data. You can find the identification of sulfur dioxide, say, that's a component of the volcanic emission, and you can trace this with the satellite imagery. Sometimes volcanoes go off that haven't gone off before, and we're not expecting them to go off. Say if there's no seismometers around a given volcano that hasn't gone off in 100 years, you might not be expecting it to go off in the satellite imagery. Since satellites can be globally comprehensive, that might be the first sign that you have that a volcano in an unexpected area is going off.
So it's a good backup system. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And people are working all the time on automating the interrogation of satellite data by computers to provide a first alert to a human, so the software will say, we think this might be important. Human, go take a closer look. Because the people are still the best way to interrogate the imagery, but the planet's a big place, and we can't be looking everywhere all the time, so the software helps give a first cut. And then in Alaska, there's a special kind of surprise angle where the satellites are helpful, and that is the Katmai eruption of 1912. Huge eruption. There is still somewhat of a moonscape out there in southwest Alaska where all this ash is laying on the ground. And sometimes a strong weather pattern comes along where we have roaring northwest winds that go across the Alaska Peninsula there and can actually pick some of this ash up off the ground. No volcano is going off. This was more than 100 years ago that volcano actually blew. So you're not going to see a heat signature like we were discussing. There will be no seismic signature of a volcano going off. So those data sets, they'll say, oh, no problem. But you can see in some of the satellite imagery this ash, as it's called, resuspended. When the wind comes along, picks it up, the ash can be lofted a few thousand feet in the air just with the wind. And an airplane flying into that plume is exposed to some danger. So we need to track that ash to provide guidance to aviators that you don't want to be flying here at these elevations in this area. We've got some imagery of the resuspension, and you can see the wind blowing strongly from the northwest, picking up the ash and blowing it down to the southeast. And so that's another, perhaps not immediately obvious hazard of volcanic ash. Katmai is the gift that keeps on giving, for sure.
Very good. So we've got satellites that can help us understand the weather from the past and the immediate past. And we talked last time about how that's feeding into the forecast modeling to help improve predictions. But now they're also protecting the general public with aviation-sensitive information and watching volcanoes, whether they're erupting or maybe have erupted in the past, and finding the left-behinds from those volcanic events there. So really impressive stuff. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again today. And you're a gift that keeps on giving from the satellite community, so thanks a lot, and we hope to have you back again soon. Again, Eric Stevens with GINA at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And if you'd like to check out any of the information that Eric has shared with us again today, you can do that very easily by going to www.gina.alaska.edu. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Coastal water forecast, or hold on a second here, let me back it up to the sea ice analysis done today, December 27th. Still have ice there in Bristol Bay, and not much ice south of the Forelands there in Cook Inlet, pretty much ice-free down that way with minimal ice in Kamishak Bay. And then kind of a westward drift to the ice there, especially along Yukon Delta into Norton Sound, the Bering Strait there, and actually thinning out there along along the coast, eastern Norton Sound there, due to the easterly winds, and that'll continue with that drift. And don't look for a lot of new ice to form south of Nunivak Island. Not much change expected for the next couple of days. And for the coastal water forecast, small craft advisories for southeast winds, mostly 30 knots with 15-foot seas, up to 15-foot seas there along the outer coastline. More like 25 knots along the coast of Prince of Wales Island. Lighter winds over the inside waters from the south-southeast, 20 knots in the case of Clarence Strait, 15 knots out of the southeast Stevens Passage, south winds 20 knots, 4-foot seas for Lynn Canal. Those swing around to the north become quite light, with seas becoming pretty slight as well, down to 10 knots for the winds, 2 feet or less for the seas. Southeast 20 for Stevens Passage, small craft advisories, Clarence Strait, 25-knot winds out of the southeast. And gales for the north coast there, southeast coming up to 40 knots with seas building toward 20 feet. And even the south coast, east 30 knots with 20-foot seas. And for Prince William Sound, east winds 30 knots tomorrow, seas 7 feet, southeast 30 with 16-foot seas. For the eastern North Gulf Coast, lighter winds west area there with direction out of the east at 20. And the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, southeast 25 knots with seas 8 to 14 feet. Southern Cook Inlet, northeast 20, seas 5 feet, and 15-knot winds north of the Forelands. Small craft advisories for northern Cook Inlet on Tuesday, northeast winds coming up to 25 knots. South of the Forelands, looking for 30-knot winds out of the northeast. Gale warnings for Kamishak Bay, 35 knots right out of the east. Southeast 30 for the Barren Islands and western North Gulf Coast, but full gales there for the eastern North Gulf Coast area, Middleton Island, 45 knots from the southeast, and not much change for Prince William Sound. Next couple of days, 30-knot winds out of the east. And Kodiak Island, south to southeast winds, 20 knots, seas up to 16 feet. And for the area from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, south 25. Small craft advisories actually from Sitkinak all the way to Cape Sarachev, 25 to 30-knot winds with seas up to 27 feet. We've got gales on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, out of the south, 35 knots. Small craft advisories, Bristol Bay, southeast 25. Those will become more easterly, but hold at 25 knots for Bristol Bay on Tuesday. And then lighter southerly winds bearing beside the Alaska Peninsula and south side there. We're looking at southwest winds at 30 knots, turning south 30 knots from Castle Cape all the way up the east side of Kodiak Island, east 25, Shelikof Strait. Gales for the central eastern Aleutians, south-southeast 35 to 45 knots there through tomorrow, with seas running anywhere from 12 to 31 feet. And for Amchitka, west 30 knots, and Kiska, Shimianatu, northwest 35. Those will become west at 35 from Shimia to Kiska, Amchitka, southwest 30, Adak and Atka about the same, small craft advisory southwest 25 to 30 knots, and south to southwest winds for the Fox Islands 25 to 30 knots, southwest coast, southeast 30 tomorrow. Gales for the Pribilof, south 35. Gales for St. Matthew Island, east 35, east 30, St. Lawrence Island, east 25 knots for St. Lawrence Island. So lighter winds on Tuesday, southwest coast, lighter easterly winds as well, east 20 knots, seas up to 8 feet. Gales hold for the Pribilofs and St. Matthew Island for 35 knot winds from the east southeast. Central eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, east to northeasterlies at 15 knots, pick it up to 25 knots, say from Point Lay to Cape Beaufort, and then gales Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, northeast 35, and then east 25 from Cape Thompson to Wales. And for Tuesday, Wales to Cape Thompson, east 25, Cape Thompson to up the west side, say Point Lay, northeast 30, central coast on Tuesday, northeast 20, and 15 knot northeast winds for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. For tonight, that huge low out over the Bering Sea rises, the pressure, central pressure rises up to 950 millibars, and that front really washes out, pulling away from the main low center over the interior there. Holds together a little better, keeps it wet and unsettled for the North Gulf Coast, and kind of windy as well, but breezy for the western interior, and winter storm warnings continue for the Yukon Delta and St. Lawrence Island area to the Bering Strait coast through tonight into tomorrow. And then for tomorrow, that system continues to wash out over the western interior areas, and slowly conditions improve even up from St. Lawrence Island to the northwest coast. And the next day, dry over the interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.